In a small mountain village in Dagestan, a father made a promise to himself. He would build not one but 2 UFC champions. He did not have money. He did not have connections. He had a gym made of sand, a bear cub for his son to wrestle, and an unbreakable belief that pain builds legends. He succeeded. Both men he trained became UFC champions. But he never got to see it happen. Because the man who built Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev died before either of their biggest dreams was fully realized. And what he left behind changed the sport of mixed martial arts forever. So how did one coach, from one of the poorest regions in Russia, create 2 of the most dominant champions the UFC has ever seen? If you love sports stories, documentaries, and untold moments from the world of sports, make sure to subscribe to Sports Arena. This is the story of Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, a man most casual fight fans have only heard mentioned in passing, usually as Khabib's dad. But that description barely scratches the surface. Abdulmanap wasn't just a father. He was a 5-time combat sambo world champion, a master of multiple martial arts, and the architect behind one of the most feared fighting camps on the planet. He built a system in the mountains of Dagestan that produced not 1 UFC champion, but 2, his son Khabib, and his son's childhood friend, Islam Makhachev. Almost nobody outside of Dagestan understood what was really happening in that gym for over 2 decades. And the full story, the sacrifices, the tragedy, and the mission that outlived the man himself, is far more emotional than most fans realize. By the end of this video, you'll understand why UFC President Dana White once called this family the toughest human beings on the planet. But first, we have to go back to where it all began, a village with no gym, no equipment, and no reason to believe a champion could ever come from there. The path to greatness. Khabib Nurmagomedov was born in 1988 in the small village of Sildi, high in the mountains of Dagestan, a region in the North Caucasus of Russia known for producing some of the toughest wrestlers and combat athletes on earth. His father, Abdulmanap, had already built a reputation as a serious martial artist before Khabib was even born. He held mastery in combat sambo, judo, and wrestling, and he had a vision that most parents would consider extreme. He wanted to raise not just a good fighter, but an unbeatable one. There's a story that has become almost mythical in MMA circles, that Abdulmanap had young Khabib wrestle a bear cub to build his strength, confidence, and comfort with controlled chaos. Whether viewers see this as intense or excessive, one thing is certain. It reflects exactly how seriously this family took the craft of fighting from the very beginning. Abdulmanap didn't train Khabib alone. He built an entire system, a training camp that pulled in the toughest young athletes from across the region, including a quiet, hardworking kid from a neighboring area named Islam Makhachev. The 2 boys trained together, sparred together, and grew up under the same demanding coach, inside the same unforgiving system. What would you have done if your father pushed you that hard, every single day, with no shortcuts allowed? Abdulmanap's training philosophy was simple but brutal. Technical mastery first, emotion second. Fighters under his watch were drilled for hours in sambo and wrestling fundamentals before they were ever allowed to focus on flashy striking or highlight reel finishes. This is part of why Khabib's style would later look so suffocating and so difficult to counter. It was built on decades of foundational repetition, not shortcuts. But building a champion in the mountains of Dagestan, far from any major fight promotion in the world, was only step 1. The real test was about to begin. UFC rise. Khabib made his UFC debut in January 2012, arriving in the promotion already carrying an undefeated record. But almost nobody outside hardcore MMA circles was paying attention yet. What happened next shocked everyone who did. Khabib didn't just win fights, he dismantled opponents. His signature style, a suffocating blend of relentless takedowns and adapted sambo control, made it nearly impossible for opponents to establish any offense at all. Fighters who were considered dangerous strikers found themselves pinned against the cage, unable to do anything but survive. By the mid-2010s, Khabib was widely regarded as one of the most avoided fighters in the entire UFC roster. His undefeated record kept growing, his reputation kept growing, and yet strangely, his path to a title shot kept getting delayed. Do you think this decision changed sports forever? Let us know in the comments, because the next few years of Khabib's career would test his patience in a way few champions have ever had to endure. Overcoming adversity. Here's something most fans still don't know. Khabib went nearly 3 years between UFC victories at one stretch, not because he was losing, but because he simply could not stay healthy or find an opponent willing to face him. Injury after injury piled up. A knee injury, a rib injury, weight-cutting complications that landed him in the hospital before a scheduled title eliminator. Fight after fight fell apart, sometimes just days before he was set to step into the cage. For a fighter with a perfect record and a growing legion of fans, the frustration became almost unbearable. Almost nobody knew what happened behind the scenes during this period. While the UFC's marketing machine moved forward with other stars, Khabib and his team, led by Nurmagomedov, kept grinding in near silence, training as if the title shot was coming next week, even when there was no fight scheduled at all. This is where Nurmagomedov's coaching philosophy became more than technique. It became psychological survival. He had built his son not just to win fights, but to endure the agony of waiting for an opportunity that kept slipping away. But the truth was even darker than delayed fights and bad injuries. Every missed opportunity meant more time for other lightweights to build their own cases for a title shot. Khabib was, in some ways, running out of time to prove he deserved what many analysts already believed he had earned years earlier. What would you have done if you were the best in the world at your sport, but kept getting denied the chance to prove it? Finally, in 2018, after years of setbacks, Khabib got his opportunity, and what followed would become one of the most talked about chapters in UFC history. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe, because we cover the biggest rise and fall stories and untold legacies in sports every single week here on Sports Arena. Fulfilling the dream. By 2018, Khabib Nurmagomedov was finally UFC lightweight champion, having claimed the vacant title with a dominant performance. But the story was far from over. Waiting for him was Conor McGregor, at the time, the biggest superstar the sport had ever produced. The build-up to their fight became one of the most explosive, controversial rivalries in UFC history, filled with personal insults. A real-life bus attack incident involving members of Khabib's team, and a media circus unlike anything the sport had seen before. But this was only the beginning of the drama. When the two finally fought at UFC 229 in October 2018, Khabib delivered a dominant, methodical performance, submitting McGregor in the 4th round. For a moment, it looked like a clean, historic victory. Then everything changed. Immediately after winning, Khabib leapt over the cage and into the crowd, triggering a post-fight brawl that resulted in fines and suspensions for both fighters. The image was chaotic, but underneath the chaos was something deeply personal. Khabib later explained that members of his team had been targeted with disrespect toward his religion and his family, and in that moment, years of tension boiled over. Despite the controversy, one thing was undeniable. Khabib had become the undisputed UFC lightweight champion, fulfilling the exact vision his father had set out to build decades earlier in that mountain village. Who do you think was really responsible for how that night unfolded? The promotion, the rivalry, or the fighters themselves? Khabib would go on to defend his title multiple times, extending his undefeated record and cementing his place among the greatest fighters in UFC history. But the next chapter of this story wouldn't be about victory in the cage. It would be about something far more painful: legacy and loss. In early 2020, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov fell seriously ill. Reports indicated he had contracted COVID-19, and his condition rapidly worsened, leading to heart surgery complications while he was hospitalized. For months, Khabib and the entire Dagestani MMA community held on to hope. Update after update came from the hospital. Fans across the world, many of whom had never even followed MMA closely, found themselves following the health updates of a coach they'd barely heard of a year earlier, because his story had become inseparable from his son's. The real reason this loss hit so hard wasn't just the tragedy itself. It was the timing. Abdulmanap passed away in July 2020, just months before Khabib's next scheduled title defense, a fight Khabib had promised his dying father he would still take. In October 2020, Khabib stepped into the octagon against Justin Gaethje, submitting him in the second round to defend his title once again. But instead of celebrating, Khabib broke down in tears in the middle of the cage and announced something almost nobody expected. This was his final fight. He retired undefeated, with a perfect professional record of 29 wins and 0 losses, a mark almost unheard of at the highest level of any combat sport. Would this athlete still be considered one of the greatest of all time if this tragedy had never happened, or was his legacy already secured before that night? That's a question fans are still debating. Khabib walked away from the sport at the peak of his powers, honoring a promise to a father who never got to see this final chapter play out. But Abdulmanap's mission wasn't just about Khabib. There was still one piece of his vision left unfinished: finishing the job. Remember the quiet kid from a neighboring village who trained alongside Khabib as children under Abdulmanap's watchful eye? That was Islam Makhachev, and Abdulmanap had always believed he had championship potential, just like his son. After retiring from competition, Khabib didn't walk away from the sport entirely. He transitioned into a coaching role, taking over much of the responsibility his father once carried, and dedicated himself to guiding Islam Makhachev toward the UFC title his father had always envisioned for him too. Months later, everything changed for Islam. Under Khabib's corner guidance, and carrying the same suffocating, methodical fighting style the family had spent decades perfecting, Islam Makhachev climbed the lightweight rankings and eventually claimed the UFC lightweight championship himself in 2022, becoming champion in the very same division Khabib had once dominated. For those who understood the full story, this wasn't just another title win. It was the completion of a mission that began decades earlier, in a village gym, with a father who believed 2 boys from Dagestan could conquer the toughest fighting promotion on earth, even though he wouldn't live to see either title fully realized in front of him. Subscribe to Sports Arena so you never miss stories like this one, where legacy, sacrifice, and sport collide in ways that go far beyond the scoreboard. So, how did one coach from one of the poorest regions in Russia create 2 of the most dominant UFC champions the sport has ever seen? The answer wasn't talent alone. It was decades of unglamorous, repetitive, painstaking work, built on a philosophy that pain and discipline create excellence, carried out in a mountain village most of the world had never heard of, by a man most fight fans still don't fully know the name of. Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov never got to watch his son lift the title as an undisputed, undefeated champion in person during that final chapter, and he never lived to see Islam Makhachev's championship moment either. But both men carried his vision forward, fight after fight, promise after promise, until it was complete. The final takeaway is this: legacies aren't always finished by the people who start them. Sometimes they're finished by the people who were built by them. What do you think? Was Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov the greatest coach in combat sports history? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe to Sports Arena for more incredible sports stories, rise and fall documentaries, business breakdowns, and untold moments from the world of sports. Next time, we're diving into another untold story from the world of combat sports, one that reveals how a single decision inside the octagon changed the direction of an entire promotion. You won't want to miss it.